Before we begin tonight's mystery, a gentle request. If you find yourself drawn to stories where silence speaks and shadows remember, please subscribe to Whims and Whispers. It helps our community of seekers grow and ensures you never miss the next shadow that speaks. It was a quiet holiday evening in Praia da Luz, Portugal, the kind of seaside town that seems immune to tragedy. Whitewashed villas clung to the hillsides, their terracotta roofs glowing beneath the southern sun. Narrow cobblestone streets wound toward the sea, where the Atlantic waves rolled soft and steady against the sand. Families wandered in the dusk, children's laughter carried on the breeze, mingling with the scent of grilled sardines and jasmine drifting through open windows. For visitors, the Algarve was a sanctuary, marketed as safe, sun-soaked, and serene. But on the night of May 3rd, 2007, that illusion of safety was shattered. A child slipped away into the dark, and the world has never stopped searching. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from her bed while her parents dined just 50 yards away. No cry, no footsteps, no goodbye. Only an open window and silence. At first glance, the McCann family seemed like any other. Jerry and Kate, both physicians from Leicestershire, England, had built the kind of life many admired: stable, hardworking, close-knit. Their eldest child, Madeleine Beth McCann, was 3 years old that spring. She was bright and spirited, with wide hazel green eyes, one marked by a unique fleck in her right iris. It would later become her symbol, splashed across missing posters and international campaigns. Those who knew her described her as lively, funny, and endlessly curious. A little girl with a personality far bigger than her frame. Photographs captured her smiling beneath the Portuguese sun, blonde hair framing flushed cheeks. To look at her was to see childhood itself, fragile, fleeting, and full of light. That May, the McCanns set off for a holiday with a close group of friends, couples with children of their own. The media would later call them the Tapas 7. Their plan was simple: spend the days in leisure and the evenings sharing meals at the Ocean Club Resort's tapas restaurant. With the apartments only steps away, the parents believed the arrangement was safe. The children would sleep soundly in their beds while the adults gathered just yards apart. The McCann's holiday home was apartment 5A, a modest ground floor flat with 2 bedrooms, a small living space, and sliding glass doors that opened onto a patio garden. From there, the family could see the resort's tennis courts, the pool, and most importantly, the tapas bar where they planned to spend their evenings. It seemed ordinary, convenient, the kind of detail no one questions until it is too late. The days unfolded in the golden rhythm of a family holiday. The children splashed in the pool and dug their hands into the sand at Praia da Luz's beach. They ran laughing between sunbeds, shared ice cream cones under striped umbrellas, and drifted to sleep in the heavy heat of late afternoons. For Jerry and Kate, it was a chance to exhale, to step out of the grind of work and rediscover joy in the company of friends and their children. To onlookers, it was a scene of peace. Families gathered at a resort, parents relaxed, children carefree. The kind of trip countless families take each year. And yet within that ordinariness, the seeds of tragedy had already been sown, because safety is a fragile illusion. Behind doors, behind windows, we tell ourselves that our children are safe, protected by proximity, by habit, by trust. But sometimes, the walls we believe in are paper thin, and sometimes, a single open shutter is enough to let the darkness in. Madeleine's disappearance did not begin on the night of May 3rd. It began here, in the comfort of a family holiday that would soon unravel into one of the most haunting mysteries of the century. The night of May 3rd, the final full day of the McCann's holiday, dawned like any other. The Algarve sun rose bright and relentless, its warmth pressing down on the whitewashed walls of Praia da Luz. For Jerry and Kate, it was a morning of simple pleasures, watching the children play by the pool, sharing laughter with friends, and taking in the easy rhythm of a town that seemed untouched by urgency. By afternoon, Madeleine and the twins, 2-year-old Sean and Amelie, were bathed and fed, their energy finally yielding to the slow, heavy heat of early evening. The children were tucked into clean pajamas, kissed goodnight, and settled in the small bedroom of apartment 5A. The room was modest, 2 small cots for the twins and a single bed for Madeleine, pushed against the wall beneath the window. The shutters were drawn, the curtains pulled closed. A child's bedroom, ordinary in every way, and yet destined to become infamous. At around 8:30 p.m., Jerry and Kate joined their friends at the resort's tapas restaurant. It had become routine over the week. The adults would gather at the same outdoor table, sharing seafood and wine while keeping a casual watch over their children. From where they sat, the apartments were visible just 50 yards away across a pool and garden path. Close enough, they believed, to be safe. They had devised a rota system. Each parent would leave the table at intervals to check on the sleeping children. It was a plan that seemed sensible, responsible. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry rose for the first check. He walked the short path back to apartment 5A, entered through the sliding patio doors, and slipped quietly into the children's bedroom. Madeleine was lying in her bed, her blanket pulled up, her breathing steady. The twins slept soundly in their cots. All seemed well. Satisfied, Jerry returned to the restaurant. On his way back, he encountered another holidaymaker, Jeremy Wilkins, pushing his infant son in a stroller. The 2 men chatted briefly beneath the glow of the street lamps, a normal, fleeting exchange. But at almost that same moment, 9:15 p.m., one of their friends, Jane Tanner, walked past the apartment on her way to check her own children. She would later describe seeing something strange, a man crossing the road, carrying a small child in pale pajamas. The child's limbs hung loosely as though asleep. Jane Tanner would insist, in the days that followed, that she had seen Madeleine. At the time, however, no alarm was raised. The sight was filed away, as ordinary, unremarkable, a father carrying his sleeping child. Back at the restaurant, the evening stretched on. Glasses clinked, conversations drifted, and the group of friends remained wrapped in the illusion that all was well. At 9:30 p.m., another friend checked the apartment. Again, nothing unusual was reported. But at 10 p.m., Kate McCann stood to make her round. She crossed the short distance to apartment 5A, entered through the patio, and immediately felt something different. The children's bedroom door, which had been left only slightly ajar, now gaped wide open. She stepped inside. The room was unnaturally still. The twins slept quietly in their cots, but Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate's gaze fell to the window. The shutters, once closed, were raised. The curtains fluttered in the night breeze. The window was open. A draft moved through the room, chilling her to the core. For a heartbeat, there was disbelief, a desperate, fragile hope that Madeleine was hiding beneath the blankets, that she had wandered into another room. But the truth came swiftly, like a weight crashing down. Her daughter was gone. Kate rushed back toward the restaurant, her voice rising into the night. Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. The words shattered the calm of Praia da Luz. Chairs scraped back. Wine glasses toppled. And within moments, the idyllic holiday had collapsed into panic. The beginning of a nightmare that would stretch on for decades. Kate's scream rang through the warm Portuguese night, a mother's cry slicing through laughter and clinking glasses. Madeleine's gone! Someone's taken her. The restaurant emptied in seconds. Jerry, the Tapas 7, resort staff. All of them sprinted toward apartment 5A. Panic pulsed through the resort as people spread out, shouting Madeleine's name into the darkness. The cobblestone streets echoed with voices calling into alleys, gardens, stairwells. The night, once so quiet, became a frenzy of confusion and fear. But in that frantic first hour, something crucial was lost. The apartment, the very heart of the disappearance, was never sealed. Dozens of people rushed in and out of apartment 5A. Friends, neighbors, hotel staff, even other holidaymakers, desperate to help. They touched doors, windows, curtains, bedding. They moved furniture. They trampled potential footprints. Any fragile clues that might have pointed to what happened to Madeleine were smudged, erased, or destroyed. By 10:40 p.m., the Portuguese police were called. Local officers arrived, but their first assumption was simple. Madeleine had wandered off. It was not unusual in seaside towns for children to slip outside, curious, restless, following the pull of the night air. So the search began not as a hunt for an abductor, but as a search for a lost child. Officers combed the resort grounds with flashlights, their beams slicing across hedges and pathways. Volunteers joined in, sweeping the beach, construction sites, and narrow back streets. Neighbors leaned from balconies, straining to hear a child's cry. But the town was silent. The air was still. No one saw Madeleine. No one heard her. By dawn, the chilling realization settled in. This was no accident. Madeleine had not wandered away. She had been taken. The case was handed to the Polícia Judiciária, Portugal's criminal investigation unit. But from the beginning, cracks appeared. Their methods clashed with the expectations of the McCanns and later with Scotland Yard. Key forensic work was delayed. Leads were missed. Communication broke down. Meanwhile, the press descended like vultures. Praia da Luz, once serene, became a spectacle. Reporters crowded the streets, cameras flashing, headlines screaming. Within days, Madeleine's face was everywhere. Her wide eyes and iris fleck beamed from television screens and front pages around the world. Posters bearing her photo were plastered across airports and border crossings. A single child from a single seaside town had become global, but inside the investigation, certainty was slipping away. Witnesses were interviewed. Jane Tanner's account of seeing a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. became a central focus. A description was circulated: a dark-haired man in beige trousers holding a sleeping child. Computer-generated sketches were released, but no one recognized him. The lead dissolved into speculation. Then came the dogs. In the summer of 2007, British cadaver and blood dogs were brought to apartment 5A. Their alerts were unsettling. The cadaver dog signaled in the children's bedroom, by the living room sofa, and later in the trunk of the McCann's rental car, hired weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. The blood dog also alerted in the apartment. The implications were explosive. Whispers turned into headlines. Had Madeleine died in the apartment? Had her parents covered it up? In September 2007, Jerry and Kate McCann were declared arguidos. formal suspects. The world was stunned. The media feasted. Some headlines painted the parents as grieving innocents caught in a nightmare. Others painted them as cold and calculating, staging an abduction to hide a terrible truth. The pressure was unbearable, and yet when tested, the evidence crumbled. The DNA samples were partial, degraded, and inconclusive. The dog's alerts, while dramatic, were not definitive proof. No body, no weapon, no confession, no certainty. Eventually, the McCanns were cleared, but suspicion had already seeped into the case, poisoning public opinion, dividing investigators, and fracturing trust. Years later, Scotland Yard launched Operation Grange in 2011, a fresh review of the evidence. Detectives re-examined old leads, questioned new suspects, and chased sightings across borders. More than £13 million was spent. Theories shifted. Persons of interest rose and fell. But time and again, hope turned to silence. And so the investigation became its own kind of tragedy, a story of missed chances, mistrust, and mistakes. Evidence was lost, confidence shattered, suspects named and discarded. And at the center of it all, one haunting truth remained. Madeleine was still gone. When the facts run thin, the shadows begin to whisper. And in the case of Madeleine McCann, those whispers have multiplied into a storm of theories. Each one attempts to fill the silence left by her absence. Each one reflects not only the evidence or lack of it, but also our deepest fears about safety, trust, and the fragility of family. 1. The stranger abduction. The most enduring theory is also the simplest, that Madeleine was taken by a stranger. Praia da Luz was a tourist town, a revolving door of visitors and workers, familiar faces, and strangers passing through. In the days before May 3rd, multiple witnesses reported suspicious individuals loitering near the Ocean Club. Some described men watching the apartments. Others mentioned people posing as charity collectors, knocking on doors. Jane Tanner's 9:15 p.m. sighting feeds this theory. A man carrying a child in pale pajamas, moving away from the McCann's apartment. Scotland Yard would later release computer-generated images of a man seen in the area, but no one was ever identified with certainty. This theory suggests Madeleine was targeted, perhaps by a predator, perhaps as part of a trafficking network, and removed from the apartment in a matter of minutes. It is chilling not just because it is possible, but because it is terrifyingly plausible. A child stolen from her bed while her parents sat just yards away. 2. The parental involvement theory. Dark, controversial, and for many, unbearable. This theory grew from the alerts made by the British cadaver and blood dogs. They indicated traces of blood and the scent of a body inside apartment 5A, and later in the trunk of the McCann's rental car. Some investigators speculated that Madeleine may have died in an accident inside the apartment, perhaps a fall, perhaps something unintentional, and that her parents staged an abduction to protect themselves. Inconsistencies in early witness statements only fueled suspicion. Add to this the immense media pressure, and soon the theory dominated headlines worldwide. For a time, Kate and Jerry McCann were official suspects, but in the end, the evidence was circumstantial at best. The DNA samples were degraded, the dog's alerts inconclusive, the timelines uncertain. British and Portuguese authorities alike admitted there was nothing concrete tying the parents to Madeleine's disappearance. Still, the suspicion lingers, proof of how quickly grief can be twisted into accusation, and how deeply doubt can scar. 3. The botched burglary. Another theory paints a different picture: a break-in gone wrong. Praia da Luz was not immune to petty theft. Tourists were often targets for opportunistic burglars. Perhaps someone slipped into apartment 5A, expecting to find wallets, jewelry, or electronics. And perhaps, startled by a waking child, the intruder took Madeleine to silence her presence. Yet critics of this theory point out that valuables were left untouched. Money and belongings remained in plain sight. Why take a child unless she was the target from the very beginning? 4. The trafficking network. For many, this is the most harrowing possibility: that Madeleine was abducted and sold into an organized trafficking ring. Blonde-haired, English, and strikingly photogenic, Madeleine would have been a desirable target in the eyes of predators. Portugal and Spain had documented cases of child exploitation networks, and Praia da Luz was close to international transport routes, roads, ferries, airports. Unconfirmed sightings of girls resembling Madeleine surfaced in Spain, across Europe, and especially in Morocco. Witnesses described seeing a young girl with pale hair escorted by unfamiliar adults. None of these sightings were ever verified, but each one stoked the possibility that Madeleine was taken far from Praia da Luz within hours, spirited away into a world where she might still exist, unseen even now. 5. The cover-up theories. And then there are the theories that speak not of crime, but of corruption. Some believe local authorities mishandled the investigation so badly that cover-ups became inevitable, whether to protect tourism, shield incompetence, or obscure darker connections. Others suggest international intelligence agencies became entangled, muddying waters, burying truths. These theories often veer into speculation, conspiracy, and paranoia, but they exist for a reason, because when answers are absent, suspicion thrives. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann has produced theories as numerous as the headlines that carried her face: stranger abduction, parental involvement, burglary, trafficking, cover-up. Each one holds a shard of possibility. Each one has been dissected by investigators, journalists, and millions of ordinary people who cannot let go. And yet, none completes the picture. Like a puzzle missing its most vital pieces, Madeleine's case remains unfinished, suspended between fact and fear, silence and speculation. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann was never only a crime. It became a mirror, reflecting the fears of parents, the failures of institutions, and the insatiable hunger of a world that consumes tragedy until it becomes folklore. From the very first hours, the media transformed Madeleine into more than a missing child. Her photograph, blonde hair, wide eyes, and that tiny fleck in her right iris became an icon. Within days, her face was plastered across Europe, on lampposts, at bus stations, on billboards, in airports. Travelers passing through customs were met with posters of a little girl who had vanished through a single open window. Her name entered living rooms worldwide. Newscasters repeated it night after night. Headlines blared it in bold letters. Madeleine was no longer just a daughter to Kate and Jerry McCann. She was everyone's child, the embodiment of innocence lost. And with that, the world changed. Law enforcement agencies took note. Interpol added Madeleine to its yellow notice system, urging countries to remain alert for her image. Police forces across Europe began sharing data more urgently, recognizing how quickly children could vanish across borders. In the wake of her disappearance, calls for stricter child protection laws gained new momentum. Families became more vigilant. The illusion of safety on holiday, the belief that it couldn't happen here, was gone. But the case also revealed something darker, the spectacle of grief in the modern age. Madeleine's disappearance became not just a headline, but an industry. Documentaries, books, tabloid exposés, conspiracy forums, all fed on her absence. The McCanns, once ordinary parents, became figures of fascination and scorn, lifted and vilified in equal measure. Their every gesture was analyzed, their sorrow dissected. For some, they became symbols of endurance, for others, suspicion. The tragedy had escaped their control and become a narrative owned by the public. Over time, Madeleine's name stopped being just a child's. It became a phrase, invoked like a warning. Remember Madeleine McCann? Parents whispered it in airports, in hotel rooms, in hushed conversations on family holidays. She became a reminder that danger can slip in quietly, even through shutters you thought were secure. And as years passed, she crossed the boundary from reality into legend. Each new headline, a fresh suspect, a reported sighting, a new lead, reignited the world's attention. Each time, hope rose. Each time, silence fell. Slowly, the case began to feel less like a crime to be solved and more like a ghost story, a mystery that refuses to rest, haunting border crossings and hotel rooms, newsstands and living rooms. Madeleine is both a child who once laughed and played in the Algarve sun and a symbol that lingers in the collective memory. She exists now at the intersection of law, media, and myth. Nearly 2 decades later, her absence is still present. New documentaries premiere. New theories trend online. New names surface as persons of interest. But always, inevitably, the case collapses back into the same silence. An open window, a mother's scream, and a child the world cannot forget. Madeleine McCann is no longer only a missing girl. She is a story the world tells itself, a reminder that innocence can vanish in an instant and that some shadows refuse to lift.